At 3:15 in the morning, Tehran shook. 200 Israeli fighter jets were already deep inside Iranian airspace, and Iran's air defenses, quietly sabotaged by Mossad operatives weeks before, could not stop them. Operation Rising Lion had begun. As of June 13, 2025, the Middle East would never look the same again. For 4 decades, Iran and Israel fought through proxies, shadows, and plausible deniability. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen. Neither side blinked first until one of them did. The moment Israel chose to strike was not random. By June 2025, Iran's axis of resistance lay in ruins. Hezbollah decapitated, Hamas diminished, Assad gone from Damascus. Tehran's forward shield had collapsed, and inside Iran's enrichment plants, uranium was being spun past 60% purity, a threshold that left Israeli military planners with a narrowing window. Netanyahu told the nation Iran could have a nuclear weapon in months, perhaps less. That assessment ended the era of restraint and opened something far more dangerous. Israel did not simply bomb Iran, it performed surgery with a sledgehammer. In the 5 hours before dawn, the Israeli Air Force launched 5 sequential waves of strikes. More than 330 munitions dropped on roughly 100 targets across 27 provinces. Mossad had already smuggled precision weapons into Iran and established a covert drone base near Tehran. That network fired first, blinding radar arrays and surface-to-air missile batteries before a single IAF jet crossed the border. The result was a kill box with no lid. 17 of Tehran's 22 districts absorbed strikes. The Natanz nuclear facility, Iran's primary uranium enrichment complex, took direct hits. The Parchin military complex burned. Hamadan Air Base went dark, and in the opening minutes, 30 Iranian generals were killed. 9 nuclear scientists were dead before sunrise. The IRGC's commander, Hossein Salami, Air Force Chief Amir Ali Hajizadeh, and Armed Forces Chief of Staff Mohammad Bagheri, the 3 men who held Iran's military together, were gone. Israel called those early operations Red Wedding and Narnia. The names were chosen deliberately. Both referenced endings. Iran retaliated with everything it had. By 6 a.m. on June 13th, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Aerospace Force launched the first drone swarm toward Israel. Dozens of long-range Shahed suicide UAVs streaking westward. In the days that followed, Iran fired a total of more than 550 ballistic missiles and over 1,000 armed drones at Israeli cities. Tel Aviv took hits, Haifa took hits. 3 cluster missiles penetrated defenses and struck 7 Israeli cities simultaneously. The Soroka Medical Center in Beersheba, a functioning hospital, was among the targets struck. Israel's layered air defense system, built around the Arrow anti-ballistic missile batteries at Palmachim, Ain Shemer, Tal Shahar, and Eilat, intercepted approximately 90% of incoming fire. American THAAD batteries, 2 of them, deployed since late 2024, absorbed the overflow. But interception burns through inventory. By the war's final days, U.S. officials were privately describing the interceptor stockpile situation as critical. The CEO of Israel Aerospace Industries confirmed production lines running 3 shifts around the clock. They were barely keeping pace. 9 days into the war, Washington crossed a line it had spent years refusing to approach. On June 22nd, 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers lifted off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri and flew a continuous arc to central Iran. They carried GBU-57AB massive ordnance penetrators, each weighing 13 tons, designed specifically to collapse underground bunkers. At Fordow, buried deep beneath a mountain near Qom, 12 of those bombs were dropped sequentially onto 2 ventilation shafts. 2 more struck Natanz. U.S. Navy submarines simultaneously fired 24 Tomahawk cruise missiles at the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. The operation was called Midnight Hammer. Trump announced the targeted facilities had been completely and totally destroyed. U.S. intelligence assessments issued days later contradicted that claim. Initial analysis suggested Iran's nuclear capability had been set back by months, not years. The CIA director then released new assessments suggesting severe damage requiring years of rebuilding. The intelligence community was publicly split. What no one disputed was what happened next. Iran's response to Midnight Hammer was not what the world expected. Tehran fired a missile salvo at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, home to thousands of American personnel. But Iran warned Qatar and Washington in advance. The missiles caused no casualties. The message was carefully calibrated. Iran could reach U.S. forces but chose not to destroy them. It was a signal, not an attack. A government that had just watched its top generals killed and its nuclear program cratered was still managing escalation. The Iranian parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, the 21-mile choke point through which roughly 20% of the world's oil transits daily. The Supreme National Security Council pulled back from that vote. But the fact that the vote happened at all, that Tehran's legislature reached for the Hormuz lever, revealed how close the war came to igniting a global energy crisis. Who stood to benefit from that near miss matters enormously. Here is what the war's coverage consistently overlooked. No regional power gained more from this conflict than Saudi Arabia, without firing a single shot. Saudi Aramco's export routes through the Persian Gulf were never interrupted. Brent crude prices spiked sharply in the war's early days, delivering a windfall to Riyadh at the precise moment Iran's competing oil exports were further suppressed. The kingdom's position as the Middle East's dominant oil power, already strengthened by years of Iranian sanctions, hardened further in June 2025. The historical parallel is exact. In 1981, Israel destroyed Iraq's Osirak nuclear reactor in a strike the world condemned, but which quietly accelerated the regional power shift toward the Gulf states. 44 years later, the pattern repeated. There is also a risk no analyst is yet naming loudly enough. Iran's nuclear program was not fully destroyed. The intelligence consensus, stripped of political spin, is that sufficient enriched uranium survived the strikes to remain relevant. The Pentagon's own assessment shifted from months of delay to 1 to 2 years. That range is enormous. And Iran retained scientists, institutional knowledge, and the will to reconstitute. The unnamed danger of the 12-day war is not what was destroyed, it is what was not. The ripple reached every major economy within hours. Oil prices responded instantly. Iran's rial, already under severe pressure, entered freefall after the ceasefire. By December 2025, it was trading at 1,650,000 rials to $1. Inflation surged past 48.6% in October. Food inflation reached an annualized rate of 64%, then accelerated to 105% by February 2026. Iran's finance minister officially blamed the 12-day war. Khamenei ordered citizens to reduce consumption of food, water, energy, and fuel. An extraordinary public admission of economic distress from a government that had spent decades projecting invincibility. Israel's own economy contracted by roughly 1% in the second quarter of 2025. Chatham House analysts projected that a more prolonged conflict would push that figure far deeper and warned that Gulf economies faced comparable exposure. The Strait of Hormuz threat alone, unrealized, sent shipping insurers repricing regional risk across the board. Iran's protests began on December 28, 2025, exactly 6 months after the ceasefire. Bazaar merchants in Tehran walked out first, then the demonstrations expanded into something the regime had not faced since 2019, a nationwide movement that added explicitly political demands to economic grievances. Death to the dictator was heard in streets where such words had always come at enormous personal cost. The United States encouraged the protests, according to Britannica's verified reporting. On January 8, 2026, Iranian security forces cracked down with lethal force, killing at least 30,000 people according to Iran's own Ministry of Health, a figure that, if accurate, places the crackdown among the deadliest acts of state violence in the Islamic Republic's history. Khamenei, who had vanished from public view during the war itself, reappeared only on July 5th, 11 days after the ceasefire, at a mourning ceremony. The questions about succession that had circulated quietly for years now circulated loudly. The Foreign Policy Research Institute noted in October 2025 that his authority, built over decades on a cult of sacred infallibility, had absorbed a blow it could not easily absorb. The regime's credibility had been fused to the nuclear program and to military deterrence. Both had visibly failed. Two scenarios now govern the trajectory of the post-war Middle East. If the ceasefire architecture holds and diplomatic channels, the Oman back channel that brokered June 24th remains the only functional mechanism. Produce a new nuclear framework. Then the 12-day war becomes a pressure event that forced a settlement neither side could reach by negotiation alone. The second scenario is darker. If Iran reconstitutes its nuclear program faster than the Pentagon's 2-year estimate, if domestic repression fails to contain the protest movement, and if the regime calculates that its survival depends on demonstrating capability rather than concession, the 12-day war becomes not a conclusion, but a prologue. The events of February 2026, when coordinated US-Israeli strikes resumed and escalated to include the Iranian leadership itself, suggest the second scenario is already underway. The ceasefire of June 24th lasted exactly 8 months, 12 days. That is how long it took to detonate 4 decades of deterrence. The Islamic Republic launched the largest missile campaign in its history and watched it largely fail. It lost 30 generals, 9 nuclear scientists, and hundreds of IRGC personnel in under 2 weeks. Its currency has since collapsed by 60%. Its people are in the streets. And the war it fought to avoid has now returned, without limits and without an off-ramp. The question that will define this region for the next generation is not whether Iran's nuclear program survives, it is whether the Islamic Republic itself does. So what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments below. TGN presented. Thank you for choosing us.